All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Dr. Eric Holsapple. Well, Eric, first of all, I didn't ask you before we hit the record button, and now I'm hoping that I pronounced your last name correctly. Did I get that correct?
Close enough. Holsapple. Yes.
Holsapple. Okay,
Yep.
very good, very good. And I want to start off. I mean, because you know what, this whole podcast is all about relationships, the value of relationships, and I have long believed as an entrepreneur that relationships are one of the most valuable assets we possess. Everything else stems from that. And the folks at Podcast Guest, the podcastguest.com platform, I just want to give a quick shout out to them and the amazing work that they're doing because Eric, you and I wouldn't even be talking.
That's right.
If
That's
it
right.
weren't
We
for them.
wouldn't.
And so shout out to them. And what I'd like to do to start off with, Eric, is I want to turn it over to you so we can set a little bit of context. I want to, let the listeners know a little bit about who you are, what you do, what inspires you most about the work you do, and even give us some backstory, some background about how you got into doing what you do
great.
today.
Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, 40 years in.
Okay.
And I came out with at Colorado State University here. I'm in Northern Colorado with an MBA in the mid 1980s. And went into real estate, and I was immediately successful. Within a couple of years, I was a manager, and then I was CEO of an Australian group. They're North American. They were coming in. The Japanese were coming in the country at the time. The Australians were right behind them, and I got a job with an Australian group. And I did really well. I started in Denver, and then I transferred to Los Angeles, and I ran offices in LA, Denver, New Jersey, just traveling all the time, But a couple of years after that, I just realized, I was overweight. I was drinking too much. I had all the outward signs of success. I had the 6-figure salary, and I had the Mercedes and the apartment and all that. But I was single. I was not happy. I wasn't exercising. I was just dying inside. And I got a transfer to Boston. They had a New York Stock Exchange company in Boston they're having trouble with, and they asked me to go take it on. And I did. And I finally stepped on a scale, and I couldn't get my top button done. I couldn't get my belt done, but I wasn't giving in, I was just, something was going on. I stepped on a scale and said, oh man, this is one of those aha moments when I said, you got to make some changes. You're not going to be around very long. So I did, I left that job. I decided I applied for a PhD in economics. I started running again. I was an athlete. I hadn't, hadn't put a pair of sneakers on in about 5 years. I started doing that. I got back into it, and I found yoga, which was my first entry into mindfulness at all.
Okay.
And it was just a really an inspiring time. And then a couple of years, I met my wife, and we started dating, getting serious. And then my older brother, he was a poet. My dad was a football coach, and they were like oil and water. They hadn't talked for a while, and the family was a little strange. My older brother had started meditation, and I just watched him come back to the family a little bit at a time. And he opened up to my dad. My dad opened up, and my dad didn't change. He's in his 70s, man. He didn't change at all. But it was like I got my family back. And he said, "You want to try it?" So I did.
Wow.
And I had immediate results with it. I had less stress. I was more present. I just noticed immediate, and I just started a practice in the mornings of my yoga and meditation on my own for a long time. I didn't come out, what I mean is I didn't run around saying I'm meditating. And back then, this is, it's still kind of woo woo in the business world, but back then, you hadn't even heard of it. There weren't yoga studios everywhere, and meditation wasn't in Time magazine, and all the things it is now.
Yeah.
And I didn't come out for a long time. I mean, years. And then gradually, as I got through my PhD program and I started teaching adjunct, but I ran a real estate business. We built it up, and just kind of one by one, people started asking me, what I was doing, what was going on. And so I'd share little things with them. And then we started a seed group at the company where we'd have a meeting once a month. And we had one Monday night. We're still having them. we'd share a book and, just get to know each other a little bit and call it centering and do a little practice. And before I knew it, the room was full. And then later we brought in mindful-based stress reduction, an 8-week program, and took it through the whole company. And the management group got together and changed the vision statement to mindfully creating community. And that was a game changer. Everybody started on nonprofit boards and running stuff and doing different, things, and just really permission to put their families first.
Yeah.
And it was just a game changer. And I saw that happen at LC Real Estate Group. And then I offered it to outside. I started living in the Gap, a nonprofit, and been training professionals for the last 5 or 6 years in mindfulness leadership practices that do it. So it sure changed my life, and it's something that I share. Yeah. And recently wrote a book on it, Profit with Presence, the 12 Pillars of Mindful Leadership.
Wow. So did I understand right that your introduction to yoga, and how many years ago was that, Eric, that you were first introduced? What year was that?
Well, it was around 1991.
Okay.
So probably 32 years ago, something like that.
It's been a little while. Time flies, doesn't it?
It does, sure does.
And your introduction was because you saw this change, not only this change in your brother, but the result that change had on his external world. Which
it was my first experience of seeing one person change, and it changed the whole world. It's just got a thing, everybody doesn't have to change, only I have to change.
That's
if
right.
I change, everything can change. That was just like so cool.
Yes. And you made the comment that, man, Dad didn't change at all. Dad didn't change a thing. Dad was Dad. He didn't change nothing. But because my brother chose to change, the whole family dynamic changed.
It did. It did. Yeah.
And I will tell you, I was really looking forward to this interview because I've had in fact, it's ironic. Right now, today, as we're doing this, I'm just coming off the back of an extended weekend because we had family come in and visit from Arizona for the last 7 days. And I just took time off to just enjoy being with them. And today's my first day back at work, we would say, after that time off. And I'll tell you, being able to have that presence, that I am completely present to what I'm doing at any given time, whether I'm at work, whether I'm not at work, because it's all just my life. And all we have is this moment right here.
And so many in the business community, they say, I tell them mindfulness, they go, oh, that's, you can just see it in their eyes. It's kind of like, oh, that's woo woo, man. That's too soft. We don't, I don't have time for that. And then I say, you look at the world, it's divided, it's distracted. I mean, to me, that's woo woo. We're not able to get anything done. They can't even figure out what left is and what right is. They don't, I just say that's woo woo to me. Mindfulness in a business context, one word is focus. It's like what you're saying. Can I just fill my mind with what I'm doing at the moment? Rather than having my laptop open and my phone open and, all this stuff, can I just sit down and, and focus on work during the day and who I'm with? And then at home, can I focus on family?
Yeah.
It's a huge gift.
It is. Yeah, for sure. Well, okay. So now that we've got a little bit of context set and people have an idea of who you are, Eric, I want to shift gears just a little bit. So I'm gonna restate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this, Eric.
There's a lot of people in that world, I could say in the non-business world, that changed me. And then, I went down the road and I was, reading these Eastern texts and, learning yoga and all that stuff. And then I'd be in my business life. Well, everything I was reading said, you got to renounce all your possessions. You got to give everything away and go sit on a mountain somewhere, and and then you'll find enlightenment, and you'll be, get the rest of the way on this journey. And I was stuck there for years, man. I said, I ain't doing that. you know,
I'm not giving up all my stuff.
I like to ski.
Uh-huh.
I like to travel. I got a summer place in Maine. I've worked hard. And when I was a young man, I made those decisions. I said, the things I like to do cost a little bit of money. I'm going to go to business school. I mean, that's what I'm going to do. So I was stuck that way for years, and I taught at CSU. And I met a guy there. I didn't meet him there, but I met him kind of through there. He ran a group. His name is Larry Kendall, and he founded the group real estate company in Northern Colorado. And I was teaching with him. I taught with him for about 10 years. And he introduced me through one or another just how this spiritual work could be in work. And it wasn't mindfulness for him, but it was a different spiritual thing. And he actually retired in his 60s and started a group called Ninja Selling, which is all about gratitude and, how to work your networks and how to do different things and how to change your mindset, how to run your brain and those kind of things. And what he taught me was, I don't have to, I can be doing it all day long. I don't have to just do my practice in the morning and then go to work and then do it at night. That these practices are every bit as applicable in business as they are in any other thing in your life. And I took that on, and he introduced me a whole lot of books, like The Answer by John Azaroff, and I can't think of The Slight Edge and Go Giver, and all these great books that were like they weren't an Eastern tradition. They were all Western books. Science of Getting Rich was another one. And read these books that said, hey, your mindset can just change, and you can do these things in the business world. And I took it on, and it was tremendous difference because it opened up the whole day for me. It opened up the daytime, where I was fresh and going at it and whatnot. And I still don't, I don't run around cockadoodle doing, I'm doing this or that. I just was changed who I was. I just changed my approach to things. And he totally changed the trajectory where I wasn't just something I did after work. This work became work. It was all day long for me. It was just okay to be grateful, be a grateful business person, and give back. And he just taught me a ton. So thank you, Larry Kendall.
Yeah. And so if you look back over the years at this relationship that you and Larry have had, and I want you to think, I'm sure you could come up with all kinds of examples. I just want to challenge you to come up with one where, because of Larry, you got to make a really big impact, whatever that may have looked like. And you also know, hands down, that would have never happened if not for the relationship that you and Larry have had. I'd love to hear an example of something like that.
I would say I watched him in his 60s recreate himself, where he kind of retired from a real estate business and started this ninja selling, he called it, which was a transformational business thing. And I don't think I would have seen that as being possible. I mean, usually you just, I don't know, you retire or you keep going, but you don't just change. So I think that inspired me to start living in the gap that I've started, and where I run mindful leadership programs, which has been totally transformational to participants and led to me writing a book, Wall Street Journal best-selling book, and helping to change a lot of lives, and including continuing to change my own, because that's part of the journey. The more people you help, the more you get helped.
Yeah.
So I would say that was that moment, seeing him actually transform himself and reinvent himself in his 60s. He's 77 or 8 and still going. He's still running workshops and things. It's amazing.
And I am willing to bet, you don't transform yourself. I mean, really at any time, when we use the word transformation, it's not money per se that motivates somebody to transform. It's impact. It's maybe legacy, but definitely impact, maybe legacy too, maybe both of those things.
And purpose.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Purpose. Yeah. And so for him and for you, So tell us, I want to, are you familiar with Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach at all?
I don't know that I am. I've heard the
Okay.
name, but
Okay.
Sullivan's a common name, so I don't know that I am.
Okay. So, because he talks about this thing of being in the gap, and the way that he uses the analogy he talks about is that is when we start setting goals and stuff, we start achieving them. Well, the more we keep moving forward, the bigger our goals become, and a lot of times we don't stop and celebrate those wins and stuff. We just keep pressing forward.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
and when we keep pressing forward and we keep looking forward, we don't notice what's really going on. We have to look backwards at where we came from, where we
Uh-huh.
started from, to really, when we
Yeah.
start doing that, that's when we're like, holy cow, look at how far I've come.
Yeah.
And most people, especially entrepreneurs, they live in what he calls the gap because they just keep go, and they're not looking back to give themselves credit for how far they've come. So I'm really curious what living in the gap is for you.
There are a number of different gaps.
Okay.
I mean, the primary one is you get a little gap between your thoughts, a little gap between where you start to notice that you have thoughts rather than just being tied up in them all the time. And then you can start what I call taking pitches. You don't have to swing at every pitch, every thought that you get. Yeah, you can just go, no, thanks. That's all right. All my thoughts aren't that helpful, or positive. So if I start looking at them like it's just that they're just bubbling up like champagne bubbles, they all came from somewhere. I'm not sure where they all came from, but most of them aren't even mine. I can start looking at those and making making a choice. Another gap is, when we get really straight with ourselves on where we are, and then we clear ourselves out and have a little clear picture we want to go. There's a gap between those things. There's a gap between where I am and where I want to go. So there's a number of different gaps, and always the gap is, in thought is where stress and anxiety hangs out. It's not what happened to it, it's what we think about it.
Yeah.
In those gaps is where peace and joy and happiness come from in my experience.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Eric, for anybody who is listening to this and going, man, Kevin, I really like Eric. I love the way he shows up. How can they find out more about what you know? I know you mentioned you've got your book and stuff. How can they get a hold of your book? How can they find out more about the work you guys do?
Well, we have a website called livinginthegap.org.
Okay.
Livinginthegap spelled out.org, and all of our programs are on there. There's a lot of free resources on there. There's things on the book in there. And of course, the book's available on Amazon. Profit with Presence, the 12 Pillars of Mindful Leadership. So, but on the website, if you want to send a message in or anything like that, that's the best place to do that.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, like I mentioned earlier, the goal of this podcast has always been really simple. I want to use these conversations to inspire our listeners, who they too are entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs. I want to just inspire them to create more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own lives. And today, Eric, with your help, we have definitely accomplished that. So I want to thank you so much for taking your time to have this conversation. Is there any last thing you feel you want to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I would say most people think it takes a lot more than it really does to get started. That and that how private it, like for years I just kept it private, just kept it myself. That you can start, we start people with meditation. It's 2 minutes a day. Some people don't even want to meditate. That's fine. There's mindful walks. There's mindful movement. There's other things you can do. Of course, there's apps and those kind of things, but generally just a few minutes a day to get started and be consistent as you can. And, you can keep it just as private as you want, for as long as you want. You don't have to come on podcasts saying, mindfulness in business is great. You can do that later on if you want to,
Sure.
But, that's a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once again, Eric, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you, and am excited to share it and get this message out there.
Right. Thank you very much.
You bet.